I would love to welcome everyone here this evening. I think we're getting people gradually coming on. Welcome here. I'm Charlene Pauls. I am the Artistic Director and Conductor of the Guelph Chamber Choir. And we welcome you to the launch of the Stephen Chatman recordings tonight. Before I begin, I would like to invite you to write in the chat this evening as we go along and let us know where you're zooming in from. I'm expecting that we will be continuing to get more people in as the minutes roll by. But if you can instigate, where are you zooming in from? It's always nice to hear where people are from outside of Ontario or within Ontario. And also at the end of our Zoom tonight, we will be opening the floor to questions and comments and have some time to have a chat with Steve and any of the musicians who are here tonight as well. So welcome. And how did tonight come to be? Most of us can look back at the pandemic and notice that there are a few silver linings that resulted from a couple of very difficult years. Tonight is one of those silver linings. Last fall, Stephen Chatman reached out to me from Vancouver and offered 6 unpublished choral pieces that he had written during the pandemic. And he offered them to Guelph Chamber Choir as a unique recording project. And at that point, I wasn't sure that we would be able to undertake this because we had a season planned. We had a full concert 21-22 season planned. But then, as we all know, Omicron hit. And at least in Ontario, we really shut it down. So in January, as we were madly rejigging plans, this gift that Stephen had offered became our lifesaver. And we looked at, what we could do, and we were very excited at the prospect of being able to record these pieces. We then reached out to Mark Lawson, who you also see on your Zoom this evening, who is the president of Chatman's American publishing company, E.C. Shermer. And he was generous in partnering with us and supporting us throughout financially and in many, many other ways. And I'm very, very pleased that Mark and Stephen are both with us this evening. So we will chat with them in just a moment. And I also wanted to say a big thank you to 3 board members who in January jumped in and also supported this project financially. And that is Saya Van Geest, Dave Davidson, and Larry Gibbs, and each of them, really wanted to support the project. So thank you to each of them. Just, talking about COVID, the recording process was not without its COVID challenges, and Mark can attest to this with our various emails back and forth. We had initially planned to record this in February, but as many of you will remember, in January, we were pretty much back in full lockdown, which doesn't help the rehearsal process a whole lot. So, we said, okay, fine, let's aim for April. After our first rehearsal together in April, the next day, one of our choir members tested positive for COVID. And suddenly that put a big damper on the whole, week of rehearsal. So we said, let's hold off again. And third time lucky, in June, we recorded and it all went very, very well. So tonight you will be hearing the videos and tracks that we created that evening or that Saturday in June. And we're very pleased that Shermer is going to be supporting us by streaming it to platforms such as iTunes and Spotify. And, who knows, maybe next year you'll see us at the Grammys. I'm just saying. I'm thinking big. So I'm pleased tonight that we have our musicians with us. Allison McNeil is our collaborative pianist, harpist Charlene Wallace, soprano Belle Tsao, and I believe videographer Caleb Bray may be joining us as well. And of course, Stephen Chatman is joining us from Vancouver, and Mark Lawson is joining us from Missouri. So welcome, Steve and Mark. Please unmute, and I would love to have you engage in the conversation with me. And I'll turn first to Mark. Now, I know you are running off to another event this evening. Just to start us off from the publishing side of things, can you just tell us a little bit about your history with Stephen Chatman and tell us a little bit about how you know Stephen and Shermer's connection with him.
Sure. So I'm actually not even sure the first year of publication. Stephen, you might be able to fill me in on that.
Mark, I was thinking about that this morning, and I don't really have an answer, but I think it was mid to late 80s.
Yeah,
I could be.
that's kind of what I was thinking as well.
Yeah.
And that his first pieces came into the E.C. Shermer catalog. And I think Stephen's work is just a very important part of our catalog. It represents such a fine body of work. His selection of poetry is great. The way he sets it, and it's just a very nice jewel in the E.C. Shermer catalog. And so it's just always been a pleasure to work with him. We enjoy working closely with a lot of different composers. And it's just a delight whenever you can find someone that matches your vision for what you want. And that's one of the things I think has always been a good match between Stephen and the E.C. Shermer catalog.
If I could just say, I would second that. It's been a wonderful relationship. I think our relationship goes back only, 7, 8 years?
Yes.
Since you became the CEO, and it's gone really smoothly, and I really appreciate your support. ECS has been a real gift to me over the years, and I hope that, I'm sure it'll continue at least while I'm alive.
Yeah.
Maybe
While we're talking about, the good relationship that has been created, is there a guesstimate as to how many titles you have of Stephen's music?
I should have looked that up beforehand.
I looked it up about a year ago, and it's at least 150.
Yeah, I was thinking it was around 150. It's sometimes what happens is when we count, you don't know if you're counting extra voicings. He's got several pieces that have SSA, TTBB settings, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So the unique number of titles is probably in the 120, 130 range. Yes.
Not bad. Not bad.
Yes.
Yes. So, and just, with all of that music that you have of Stephen's, the exposure that he's got with an international company like Shermer is fantastic. I'm sure, Stephen, that's a great benefit to you as well. I'm curious, Mark, you are working with a whole range of composers from many different locations. Is there something that makes Canadians unique in the choral landscape?
I think that one of the things that I've noticed is I'm just so pleased with how loyal Canadians are to their composers and to their music making in the country. I mean, they obviously want to share it with other countries as well, but it feels like through the Canadian broadcasting, through the Centra discs that has been around, and I know isn't as active right now, but through Choral Canada, all the different ways that the Canadians have embraced and supported their composers is very admirable. I think in a unique way that we don't have in the United States. There's not that kind of support in a way. You have to make it on your own, or I'm not sure how to describe that. But I have always been impressed with the way Canadian musicians support and talk about the composers in their country. And I just think that's very admirable.
Steve, do you want to say anything about that?
I agree. One thing you have to remember is that Canada is a huge country, but in a way it's a very small country because of the population. So even though we're spread out, we tend to know each other. The composers meet either at conferences or Canada Council as jurors, or talk to each other over the phone. So it's actually quite a small group. By small, I mean maybe, 50, 60, 70 choral composers, probably more than that. But I think I know most of them. And so we're sort of a fraternity. And I guess we compete with each other, but not really. It's a friendly competition.
And I think
supportive of each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've noticed about Canadian composition is in many ways, I feel like that the theme of nature comes up more. I think the love of the land and country comes up frequently among Canadian composers. That is something I gravitate toward and really enjoy. I mean, it's certainly by no means the only theme that comes up, but I think that it's indicative of the love of the country and of the land, and how that is moving to so many composers, and it's great to see.
That's very true. And if I can just add, landscape is important in general in the arts, whether it's visual art or literary art, music. And it has been for practically since the beginning of the Confederation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah. Now, Mark, I know you have to run off. Do you want to tell our audience where you're going? It's quite a unique concert that you're going to.
So we have a good friend of mine and was the principal trumpet in the St. Louis Symphony, and she retired a few years ago and is kind of a Pied Piper for trumpet. And so she is putting together a trumpet concert tonight, and we have trumpet ensembles with 10 to 12 trumpeters that are going to be here. So it's kind of a unique, one of a kind, one night only concert that we're involved in that start in a few minutes. So it's
Thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the concert, and we will continue without you, Mark. So thank you so much.
Well, let me just also add that it was the recordings are wonderful. Thank you for doing them. It's been a pleasure, and it's always great to be involved with projects with Stephen. So thank you very much for doing it.
And we feel the
Thank
same.
you.
Thank you, Mark. So Steve, I will turn to you now. And before we play the first track, which is Come Day, Come Night, the 6 pieces that you wrote and that you sent to us, you had said when you first sent them to me that you were quite prolific during the pandemic, and that these pieces came out of the pandemic in many ways. I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, you're perfectly right. I was looking at the dates today because the pieces are mostly 2 years old. And I think 4 of them were written around April, May, sort of one every week or two, right around the height of the pandemic. And, that was definitely the inspiration. So I found myself looking for texts which somehow fit what I was feeling, mostly, love, life, and death and birth. The 2 Christmas songs are actually earlier, at least one of them is. So they don't really count, but that's sort of what I was going through like everybody else. And I found it was a great inspiration. And what I often do is to go to a public domain library where you can find thousands of texts. The problem is if you set poems that aren't public domain, you have to deal with copyright. So I look for public domain texts, and it's quite easy to go through dozens or even hundreds a day because you know right away whether you can relate to the text. And the whole point, at least for me, is to find a text not only that I can relate to, but what I can use to use the text to create a piece of music. And so the marriage is really critical, but most importantly, I'm looking for direct language. That was very important to a composer like Sondheim. The audience has to understand the text because it's not spoken, it's sung. And you have really only one chance if you're lucky. So plain language is quite important to me, and also the rhythm and the rhyme. So I'm attracted to sound and to rhythm especially.
Well, and I think, most of these pieces are very homophonic. The choir is expressing the text more or less at the same time. So the text really does come through. And I think at one point you had said, am I correct in saying that when you look at the text, that's often the place you start when you're starting to compose a piece, as opposed to having, I'm sure it's different, but maybe you can comment on that, when you're looking at texts and beginning a new composition.
Well, for me, the text is always the starting point. Occasionally, I've run into copyright problems with texts that have had to be replaced. So in that way, the music has come first. And often it's my wife who's replacing these texts. It's happened a few times. But like I say, the text is the starting point, and then who knows what happens next. Sometimes I think of color or register or rhythm or melody or harmony. Sometimes I start with the piano part if there is one. Sometimes I start with a melodic line. Sometimes I start with a harmonic progression. Every piece seems to be different, and there's a mystery to it that I don't think anyone quite understands. You kind of go with the flow, and the main thing is not to worry about it too much.
Good point. That's a very good point. I think that's a good life lesson. We're going to now view our very first video, and this is Come Day, Come Night, a poem by Christina Rossetti. So we have set the audio with some visuals, and just an FYI, those of you who are Guelph locals, one of the pictures has been pulled from a Guelph site, and I'm not sure where it is. I just wonder if somebody can tell us if they recognize it. Midway through, you can see a park, and there's a bit of a windmill in the background and so on. So here is Come Day, Come Night, music by Stephen Chatman, poem by Christina Rossetti. Those of you who love that piece can always go and see it and scroll through it, all the credits. Are you one of those people who stays at the ends of movies and watches all the credits? I'm one of those people. I'm joined here by Belle Tsao, who is our soprano soloist. You heard all of 2 notes of her voice in that first track. You will hear more from her in our 3rd and 5th tracks coming up. So Belle is here in my house with me, which is very nice. It's avoiding some tech potential issues. And Belle, why don't you tell us about what you're doing these days and, musically, what has kept you busy?
Yes, of course. So primarily I know Charlene through, she is my voice teacher. I'm in her wonderful studio. So she has been so kind to me over the years and brought me so many opportunities, like singing these beautiful Chatman pieces as well. I sang with the Guelph Chamber Choir for one of their concerts earlier in their season, which was amazing. And I currently sing in local choirs like the Orpheus Choir of Toronto, and as well as with some other smaller ensembles when I can find small little church gigs or whatever I can get my hands on, because as you know, like you got to jump on those opportunities when you can. And
Absolutely.
as kind of an emerging artist myself, you try to take whatever opportunities you can find.
Exactly. We all know that as freelance musicians. Now, Belle has a very important other job other than her very active music life. What else do you do, Belle?
So in my day career or my normal so-called normal life, I'm actually a physician, a family doctor in the Etobicoke region, and I also do surgical assisting in the GTA, including Mississauga and North York. So very busy in the daytime with that part of my life, but also I studied music growing up and was in all sorts of like ensembles and bands and orchestra and choir, and you just can't really lose that, or it's so easy to lose that growing up and moving past kind of your school days. And that was something I never really wanted to stop doing. I wanted to keep going with music, and life does get in the way sometimes, and you maybe stop playing the cello after a few years.
Yes.
But choir is the one thing, and singing is the one thing that I felt I was able to keep going with, and I was so fortunate to be able to have the time to do that. And this summer even I just applied kind of on a little bit of a whim to do a program in Italy to see if I could do a music festival over the summer. And luckily they accepted me, and I was able to sing in Tuscany, Italy this summer. And I won my category in the voice competition there. So there's been so many wonderful opportunities, even though I'm not coming from a very traditional music background.
So there you go. For those of you who think there's only one path to being a musician, there are many, I should say. And Belle is a great example of that. We're going to play our next track, which is one of the pieces that could be a Christmas piece. It's called Sleep, Little Baby, and you'll hear a little bit more from Belle in this track. So here is Sleep, Little Baby.
Sleep, little baby, sleep, little baby, sleep, the holy angels love thee, and guard thy bed, and keep the blessed watch above thee. No spirit can come near, nor evil beast to harm thee. Sleep, 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 devoid of fear, when nothing need alarm thee. Sleep, little baby, sleep, little baby, sleep, sleep, sweet, sleep, sweet.
And I wanted to say the poem there is by Christina Rossetti, and I'm hearing some comments about our first video location. I think the consensus is that it's Riverside Park, it seems. So that's interesting. Thank you for that crowd sharing moment. And I wanted to point out the cutest thing about that last video is that little bit of drool that you see at the corner of that last baby's mouth. It's just the cutest thing in the world. Steve, I'd like to invite you to join me again, and we will introduce our next couple of videos. And so our next two videos are She Passed Away with poem by Hartley Coleridge. And the fourth is Nothing Will Die with a poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So, feel free to comment on either of those poems if you'd like. But another question that I had on the back burner for you was, what attracted you to composing for choirs? You have composed a lot of pieces for choirs. We loved singing your music, and it sings very well. So how did you fall into this, or how did this all happen? And I think you are still muted, Steve, so we have to get you unmuted.
Can
There
you
we
hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Great. Um, it was sort of by accident that I started composing for choir because I had written only one short, maybe two short choir pieces until I was about 31 or 32. And then, for whatever reason, I set a passage from Song of Solomon. Uh, and it was premiered by the Vancouver Chamber Choir. And John Washburn and other people seemed to like it. And that led to requests for other pieces and commissions, sort of one after the next. So it really started in the early 80s. And I've been composing instrumental music all along, but I'm drawn to choral music. I'm not a singer at all, but I love singers and I love choirs. So that's sort of what happened.
Hmm.
Natural that I was drawn to it.
And so much so that there was a big celebration planned for your, should I say, which birthday it was?
Go right ahead.
At your 70th birthday at the Chan Center in Vancouver. When was that supposed to happen? And tell us a little bit about that.
I was born in 1950, so my 70th birthday, it's easy to remember, 2020. So the Vancouver Chamber Choir and some of my performer friends, instrumentalists, got together and organized a concert for, it would have been February of 2020, and that's when the pandemic hit. So that concert was canceled until 2 years later. So it finally happened in March of 22. So I'm telling people that I was lucky to be 70 for 2 years.
Exactly.
So it was in the
We got to
chance.
take advantage of these things. Exactly.
Yeah, why not? Especially at my
Nice. Right. And, before we play the two videos, and we'll play them back to back, is there any advice? You have a lot of music out there for choirs. Is there any advice that you can offer conductors or choirs? And in fact, I just was scrolling through, and someone just did a dissertation on your music last year at University of Toronto under the guidance of Hilary Appelstadt, who's someone we know well. Are there things that about your music that you would like to convey to those of us who like to program your music?
That's a really good question. And I think the short answer is sing what's on the page. So if it's marked pianissimo, sing it very softly. If there's a clear tempo marking, which I'm usually quite particular about, check it with the metronome and dynamics. Basically observe anything that I care about that's in the score. I don't always care about everything. For example, sometimes I put in breath marks, sometimes I don't bother and leave it up to the choir. But Charlene, we were talking about this a while back, that many choirs take slower tempos that are marked, at least in my music. And it was great working with you because we adjusted. Of course, I hadn't heard any of these pieces. And when I heard them, sometimes the tempos were a little faster, a little slower than what I had marked. And half the time you were correct in your tempos. So I changed a few of them, and some of them to faster markings, which is sort of unusual for me. So it's a give and take. And with good performers or good choirs, you're open to their interpretations. And often, especially if the piece isn't published yet, you can make changes. There's a saying that a piece is never over until you hear the first performance. It's never finished. And I think there's a lot to that. You really have to hear the music first and then fine tune it. So it was great working with you because, you were so flexible especially in your tempo markings.
Well, and I guess the same goes for you if you decided to adjust some of them on your end. So there we go. It's a wonderful process to work on these things together. We're going to view She Passed Away and Nothing Will Die. Both have these themes of life and death that seem to have come into resonance with you as you were creating these pieces. Is there anything that you would like to say before we show them?
No, I think the texts sort of speak for themselves. As you mentioned earlier, these are all homophonic pieces. I think it's a little easier to write homophonic music than contrapuntal music, but I write both. in this case, it was very important to me that the text be heard clearly, as you mentioned before, because in a lot of contrapuntal music, going way back to, say, the Renaissance, you don't necessarily understand the text, and sometimes it's deliberate on the part of the composer. But it was important to me that the audience at least have a good chance to understand the words. And a lot of this has to do also with whether the notes are high or low, or loud or soft. Has to do with register. For example, if you write a high note on a closed vowel like E, it's distorted. So these things are very much composers are very much aware of things like that,
And
as
it
singers are.
comes through. Thank you. Let's now do some listening. And we've got two queued up. She Passed Away, poetry by Hartley Coleridge, and Nothing Will Die, poetry by Alfred Lord Tennyson.
She passed away like morning dew before the sun was high. So
Two very poignant pieces. I'm sitting here with Belle, and we're both commenting on some of the poetry there as we go along. For those of you who have joined recently, we would love to hear where you're from. If you want to just put where you're zooming in from in our chat, we would love to hear that. Also, if you have any comments or questions as we go along, at the end of our session, we will open the floor and welcome some of your comments here. So please shoot them in the chat, and we will get to them later. I would now like to welcome Charlene Wallace and have her join us. Charlene is joining us from Toronto. Sorry, I'm getting some dings here. And Charlene, welcome. Charlene is our harpist and has played with Guelph Chamber Choir on many occasions. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are? Introduce yourself to our gathered assembly here.
I'm a harp player. I play both pedal harp, and my specialty is lever harp. I also write music, and I record a lot. So yeah,
and a lot of different styles too, don't you? You embrace a lot of different styles.
Yeah.
One thing that we're talking about the texts and the pandemic and so on. I'm curious because you are a professional harpist, and how did the pandemic affect you as a professional musician? What were some of the major changes that you saw and had to navigate through?
It was deeply profound. I also tour, giving concerts and such. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I literally the week it was shut down, I then had to cancel 3 upcoming concert things in Vancouver and in BC within the next 3 months. So, and that hasn't returned. So my performing has been deeply affected, except for these incredible projects that Charlene, you have helped to create. But I've also, and my teaching, I teach a lot, and at 2 universities here. That never stopped. And for something that I said I literally would never ever do, teach online, I've embraced it a little too wholeheartedly. And I was teaching in Guelph all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't kind of made the connection that Charlene must carry a very large instrument with her wherever she goes to teach, that you can see the appeal of a Zoom lesson, particularly as a harp teacher.
And the 401.
And the 401. Exactly.
Yeah, so my teaching has carried me through, but I've also been writing a lot, and I'm now in the middle of a couple of recording projects that's sort of going to show itself.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah,
So we are now going to air the one piece that we recorded with Charlene on harp. It's another one of the Christmas pieces, Hush, My Dear. I know you will enjoy it. Here's Hush, My Dear.
Holy angels, guard
I'm watching, some of your faces on Zoom, and I'm just seeing these nice smiles as we're watching these adorable infants. I'm now welcoming Alison McNeil, who is my partner, my musical partner with the Guelph Chamber Choir. Alison has been the pianist with the choir for many, many years, and we rely on her musicality. I rely on her as a colleague in front of the choir, listening, and she was very instrumental throughout the recording process and saying, "Oh, we got to do that again," or "This wasn't good enough." We've got fantastic ears there with Alison. So, Alison, welcome here. Would you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about all the different things that you're doing these days, musically or otherwise, whatever you want to share? Oh, and you are muted, Alison. We need to unmute you.
There, I think I
There we
hear
go.
you.
Yeah.
In previous recordings with the Guelph Chamber Choir, I became known as the Angel of Death. Picky.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I don't know how many years I've been playing for the Guelph Chamber Choir, and I've played probably for every choir in the community and a bit beyond this community as well, at one time or another, not all at once. And I'm the music director at Harcourt Church as well. So, and you were asking Charlene about how the pandemic affected her. And I was just thinking, before the pandemic, I had thought to myself, nothing's changing in my life too much, and I need to learn something new. And I was sort of thinking, like, maybe I'll pick up the oboe or the bagpipes or something. And then the pandemic struck. So then I learned, audio engineering, so I could do, dozens and dozens of so-called virtual or assembled recordings. And it's been quite a haul. So yeah. So in any case, it was. I had also cut back on teaching quite a lot to concentrate on more choral conducting. And of course, that flatlined during the pandemic as well. But now things are coming back to normal, and I've got lots and lots of choirs. So,
and in fact, one of Alison's choirs, the Rainbow Chorus, will be joining us on November the 5th. We're doing a 4-choir celebratory concert. And this is the one that we had planned 2 years ago that we are, knock on wood, we'll be doing on November the 5th. Those of you who can make it, please come. It should be a very, lots of participation in singing and so on. Steve, I feel like I would love to have you jump in here as well, just to talk about our final video as we go into it. But I'm going to first direct some questions at Alison. This last piece that you're going to see this evening was our one video that the choir recorded live. We connected with a local videographer named Caleb Bray, who happens to be the roommate of one of our singers. And Caleb was one of 3 City of Guelph artists in residence this summer, and he's doing remarkable things. So Caleb and I talked about the storyline that we found within this poem. This last piece is called White Moons, and the text is, white moons may come, white moons may go. She sleeps where early blossoms blow. And there's this imagery of a woman who has passed away too early, and yet this surrounding hope. And again, I guess we're going back to nature. Maybe this is a Canadian something that we do all tend towards, of the beauty of nature is continuing around her, with the implications that life goes on, and that beauty continues, and that person's impact continues. Allison was one of our number of people in the choir who dedicated this video to special women in their lives. And Allison, I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot or if you're ready to talk about this, but no, okay.
Probably not.
Okay, I'll just say Allison's mother passed away over the pandemic, and you'll see a picture of Allison with her mother in this video, and you'll see a number of our choir members, often mothers, some aunts and grandmothers and so on. And it became a very personal statement for many of us in the choir, and shot in this beautiful location, Goldie Mill, here in Guelph. And so it's quite a special way to encounter that poem and make it our own in that way. Steve, would you like to say a few words about this last piece, or anything else, before we head into this final video? And I think we have to unmute you again.
I'm terrible with technology. I'm enjoying the conversation, learning a lot. One point is that a lot of these songs have refrains. And as I was looking for poetry, that's one thing I was looking for, sort of a short refrain, words that could be repeated. Because if words are repeated 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times, they're much easier to understand. Plus the musical aspect of a refrain, which I think can be very effective. So
And
Alison, I really enjoyed your playing.
Yeah. So I will now shift us over to our video, and Casey Connor is heading up our tech, and thank you, Casey, for doing that. I would suggest that in this case, there are some dedications that are tagged at the very end of this video. Perhaps we can let those roll out until we get the credits, because there's some beautiful tributes that are added at the end of this video. So without further ado, here is White Moons, our video that was created by the choir at the end of June at Goldie Mill in Guelph.
Those nothing
It's a really beautiful way to end our evening. I did say that it would be an opportunity to jump in with any comments or questions. I'm not seeing a lot of it coming into the chat, so I'm not sure if that means that everyone's just enjoying watching and just not really feeling like the need to jump in. But if you do have a comment or a question, now would be a great time to let us know. But I'm still not seeing anything, so I'm just going to say to Steve one more time, if you can unmute, and just to give you a very heartfelt thank you for the gift of your music, for what you have given Canada and our choral community with so many pieces. And the gift that you gave Guelph Chamber Choir in these 6 pieces, we've been very privileged to have been able to premiere them. And I think they will have a lot of life ahead of them. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlene. It's been a real pleasure working with you, and I'm so pleased with the result. I think it's first rate, and maybe we can do it again sometime.
Let's do it again sometime. There we go. We're game. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to Belle, who is standing beside me, to Charlene Wallace in Toronto, to Alison McNeil, our wonderful pianist, and to our General Manager, Tammy T. Winkle, who is very much behind the scenes organizing all of this, and to Casey Connor, who did such great work in keeping all of this flowing on the tech side. Thank you to everyone. Please, look up these songs on YouTube, stream them, share them widely. It would be great to have a lot of views on all these beautiful pieces that we were just able to create. So good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and I wish you all, a great rest of your week ahead. Take care.